welcome everyone to an episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. Your host, Travis and John. John, how was that?
It was pretty good. We had Dr. Toby, cognitive performance coach.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good one. I think if you're brand new to the sport, you should definitely listen to this one because it's going to save you a lot of heartache that you'll figure out on your own. If you've been doing it for a couple years, you're going to listen to this and go, man, I wish I'd have heard this right when I started.
Right. This Dr. Toby is a psychologist, like he mentioned, and it's a great conversation. Absolutely phenomenal. Some of the stuff that we covered, like John mentioned, was just like, it was like eye-opening, man. Like setting intentionality when you train, like we all know that, but he really dives deep into it. And you know, things like that. It's just it's just a good conversation. What was some of the stuff we covered, man?
We talk about a lot. He talks about imposter syndrome. He's going to talk about a lot of things people probably go through right now with showing up on the mats and if they're mentally there, you know, if they're present in the moment. When he's talking about if you're not, you know, how you're losing kind of some awareness and percentages. In my head, I'm thinking basically you're like a computer that's running too many programs and you need to shut them all down and just focus on the one. But
yeah.
A lot of good stuff in there. And like I said, the practitioners have been doing this for a while. It's probably going to realize they've already figured out a bunch of this. For the new person, it's going to be a treasure trove.
Yeah, he works with like high-level athletes, but I didn't want to. The majority of the people that listen to our show aren't high-level athletes, so I really try to cater the questions. We try to cater the questions and the conversation more towards like the everyday practitioner. But there are some people out there that listen to us that do want to compete and want to be a competitive person, so we definitely touch on that too. But we try to grab all aspects in this conversation. So it's just a phenomenal conversation. He's very well spoken, great guy. He has a rock climbing wall in his house. I mean, you'll hear within the first 5 seconds, like it's freaking cool.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
But everything's gonna be down in the description below if you guys want to go follow him and check his stuff out. So, thank you guys so much for listening and watching at home, and peace.
Later.
Peace.
Breaking news. Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right. They are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make sure your drapes match your carpet. By going to manscaped.com and using the code ETP20 for 20% off and free shipping. Again, that's ETP20 for 20% off and free shipping.
It's time to tame your mane. No one likes a weird beard, so say goodbye to the stubble trouble with Manscaped's Pro Beard Kit. My wife hates when I have stubble. She's like, don't even kiss me. Trim that mustache. And thanks Manscaped for making it possible now.
It all starts with the Beard Hedger. This thing is a juggernaut for fixing faces. First off, the cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 haircutting lengths, all with one guard, so no more messy drawers full of extras and add-ons. That's right. Face grooming doesn't need to be hard. Get 20 different beard lengths in just one guard.
The Pro Beard Kit also comes with 3 free gifts: a beard brush, comb, and scissors to ensure your beard is ready to impress.
So get 20% off and free shipping with the code ETP20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code ETP20. Manscaped Beard Hedger, one stroke, one guard, 20 lengths.
Thanks, Manscaped, for sponsoring this episode. Dr. Toby, how's it going today, man?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. I can't complain. It looks like it's actually going to be a nice sunny day outside today.
I know, right? I saw that. I was like, finally.
Yeah. You know, we live up in the Pacific Northwest right now, and so, you know, 300 days out of the year, it's cloudy and raining and or snowing, so it's any day that we get a break from that is a beautiful day. Maybe I could go do some bouldering or something like that, like at your house. That thing is so rad, man. I'm so jealous.
Yeah. We're lucky to live in Salt Lake. Luckily, we moved here long enough ago. It was before the property prices took off. But yeah, I love it out here. And yeah, in my guest bedroom with a little climbing wall that we get to play around on.
Did you guys make that yourself, or was it like a kit?
It came with the house.
Oh, man.
That was probably the selling point.
Yeah, right.
He was like, that's it. We're taking it.
This has things to hang on and be an ape in. I'm down.
Yeah. That's super cool. So, hey, but let's jump into the interview. And for people that don't know who you are at home, can you give us a quick background on who you are and what you offer people?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Dr. Toby. I've been a mental performance coach for over a decade now. I I started out with a master's in kinesiology, and in that time, I bumped into one of my former high school athletes. Before that, I was a high school teacher and coach for a decade as well. And at that time, Adam Piccolotti was just turning from being a amateur fighter into pro fighter with Bellator, and basically just started helping him out. Let me go back and refresh that story. Sorry about that.
No,
My
you're good.
dog barked there in the background. So he was getting his first pro debut, and I was in my first semester of my master's in kinesiology. I'd read my sports psych book cover to cover. By the time I bumped into him and said, "Hey, do you want to try this stuff out? See if it helps you as a fighter?" We started working together. He went on a huge run. We went on like a 8-0, 7-0 run as a pro MMA fighter. And with that, that brought me into AKA because he also cross trained down there. I basically established myself as a resident mental performance coach at AKA. I continued on with that, finished my master's, got my certification with the Association of Applied Sports Psychology, went on and got a doctorate in performance and sports psychology because I felt like I wanted to know more and just wanted to be better as a practitioner. And during that time, just kept building up, basically early pro fighters, and managed to get a few guys into the UFC. Nolan Hernandez is one of those who basically through his whole career, worked with him from his amateur career all the way through two UFC fights, and then various appearances in Combate and other um, promotions like that. Along that time, I was working with other coaches, and all their coaches were various real experts in BJJ. So Raul Castillo is one of those early ones. Uh, Leandro Vieira, got to know him pretty well, and got to work with some of the checkmat wrestlers. I've got to be in the room with Kaitera. Wow,
Oh wow.
talk about somebody who can do anything to anyone. He's amazing to watch, and then all of his pros like Benji Silva. Got to spend some time talking to Benji a little bit, and getting to really understand kind of that super elite level of grappler, and really got to learn a lot and provide a lot of help to various levels of grapplers and BJJ practitioners as well as a bunch of pro MMA fighters.
So, what was it in the book that caught you? You mentioned you read your book back front to back. Like, what was it with that? We were like, this is what I want to do. Like, and you reached out and started helping people.
Yeah, for me, it was really that understanding how we can get out of our own way by being intentional with our minds. And so I was always looking before that as an athlete myself, I was always trying to figure out, how can I show up right, and just kind of always feeling a little bit off. And then all of a sudden, when I started reading, all the different interventions and theories behind mental performance, it really started to click to me. All that experience and all that time coaching high schoolers, really started to understand the theory behind it and realized, oh, it's the brain doesn't necessarily work intuitively. It's kind of counterintuitive at times. For instance, if you're trying to get somebody to get their um, hands up is kind of the wrong thing to tell them, because that if their hands are here and you say hands up, they're like they are up. But if you say
Right.
higher, boom, now you get what you want. And that little subtle difference between hands up and hands higher was an example of one of those things where you start to understand how many subtleties exist and how we use our minds in a performance environment.
Yeah, when he was telling that story, I was like, remember when I'm getting coached and they're telling me to move a certain way, and in my head, I'm like, I am. Then they come over and physically put me in that position. I was like, well, just do that next time. Because what you're saying and the way I'm taking it in is not the same. Yeah, for sure.
Totally. And then, really understanding how to make goal setting actually work for you. I'm sure you guys and other people listening have set personal goals and just kind of they sat there and sat there and sat there. And maybe sometimes it was luck that pushed you closer to them. Really understanding kind of how to build not just the goals themselves, but how to create motivation around that, and then how to make that motivation meaningful. So, like setting up small pieces of success so that you actually get psychological momentum going for yourself, knowing how to turn that on, learning how to actually adapt the way that you think, the way that you talk to yourself, so that you learn how to become a better coach for yourself.
So, what is the biggest difference between like a sports psychologist and then like a typical psychologist? Because is it based on more obviously more around sports? Like, but what's like the biggest difference?
Yeah, the biggest difference is I'm looking at how do we get you to do what you want right now, and how do we get you to improve so that you can be that version of yourself that you want to become. Psychologists are more looking at what is holding you back from your past that you need to go in and resolve. Both of those can happen at the same time. I've worked with a number of fighters that have had both a psychologist working through their childhood, and then I'm there to make sure that when it's fight night, they're on. Because like with tournaments, with fight to wins, if it's the tournament's the day it is. If you aren't feeling good, the tournament does not care.
Right.
And so if you want to be a competitor, you have to show up regardless of how you feel. And that's the part that I do, that a performance psychologist is different than a counseling psychologist.
So,
So
what
you
are?
may
Sorry, go
oh
ahead.
so you
Sorry.
may so you may win the tournament and still have issues with your spouse when you get
Um,
home, but you're able to do what you want for that tournament. So different parts of your life that we work on.
John kind of mentioned something before we started recording about like the day to day stuff, right?
Yeah, like so. I mean, the way I'm hearing you, the way I interpret it is, you're just helping them get all that bullshit out of their mind. So when it's fight night, like they're solely focused on the fight night. Or if you're going to go into training, you're solely focused on training. I was kind of feeling like when you were talking earlier, like you're showing up, right? But you're like, are you really all there? Or are you really focused in on the training? Or do you have all these other thoughts that are getting in the way of what you're trying to accomplish in the training?
Exactly. And performance, the skills don't show up in performance unless they've been there and rehearsed and practice. You can't watch a video of Eddie Bravo getting a triangle choke from rubber guard and then go out and use it unless you've drilled that, right?
Yeah.
I'll attest to that
Same
statement.
concept with them.
Yeah. So when you talk about helping these people get out of their own ways, what are like some of the techniques that you do use to build this mindset?
Yeah, the simplest one, and this is one where uh, it surprised me how prevalent this is and how much it just actually helps, even though it feels low level, was really establishing intentions for daily practice. Getting practitioners to realize, yeah, your professor is, he has a plan or she has a plan for kind of direction that they're taking the class, not necessarily where they're taking you. And so you, as a practitioner and as somebody with, striving towards the black belt, you need to learn how to be intentional daily and how to make each day build upon the next, as opposed to just showing up because your practice is from 7:30 to 7 to 8:30, and just showing up at 7 p.m. and go until 8:30. You go home and shower, you feel like you're getting better, but really because you're not actually being intentional on your skill development, there's no ladder that you're climbing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sometimes I feel like I fall into that trap where I know what I want to work on, but maybe what I want to work on is not what they're teaching in class. So there's always that mix up as well. So it's like it's interesting. It's finding the time to try to be intentional with what you want to work on sometimes versus what we're teaching the class.
Exactly. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be specific to a move. Maybe it's just being better at being comfortable from bottom.
Hmm.
And then it's realizing, hey, we're working on sweeps today. I can work on being comfortable from bottom as part of working on sweeps. And
Yeah.
so for the whole week, I'm working on being more comfortable at being on bottom. And the way I'm showing that is I'm opening my guard more often. So in sparring, whenever anybody sees me in sparring, they're seeing me with my guard open more because I'm trying to attack as opposed to keeping it closed because I just fear losing control when I'm on bottom.
Yeah, I know, one of the struggles that a lot of people have is, that growth mindset of jujitsu and letting go of the fear of not winning in practice, or, a lot of people don't want to accept failure as growth. How do you help people work past that?
Yeah, that's where it really becomes being more focused on how you're changing your style. So winning is a result of a good style. So it's get first kind of making that difference and then realizing practice is about perfecting that style. And so the way we actually create that in the mind is then we're going to set weekly goals that are around things like becoming more aggressive from guard. And so then it's, so today what the goal is to never keep my guard closed for more than 10 seconds as an example goal. And so I'm going to lose a lot doing that because I'm probably going to be in situations because I'm trying. And when
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
trying, I'm going to make mistakes. When I make mistakes, I'm probably going to get caught. I'm going to learn not to do that. And then I start to realize, oh, it's getting further and further before I get caught. It's being able to figure out that edge and right in on that edge of control and losing control that makes practice fun. Winning starts to be less of a important thing to me because I've set up a game where I'm playing against myself.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned at the end there that you're playing a game against yourself, because, I mean, John and I can attest to it too. Like, you always feel like you have to do something to beat the other person. You know what I mean? And when we look at, progression in jujitsu, like you just mentioned too, like, it's the little things that can make a big difference, right? Like, these little things add up over time to create these bigger and grander progressions and goals that you get, right? We always talk about micro and macro goals. Like, you got to understand like what the small aspects of your major goal are in order to progress to that major goal. How do you handle goal setting with people when you work with them?
Yeah, so what I really try to get them to do is, I mean, everybody comes up with kind of, hey, yeah, I want to get a medal at Pan Am's this year. And so that's a great goal to have for sure. That's something that drives you, something you want. It's not as controllable though as what your skill is going to be when you show up to Pan Am's, as what your approach is going to be when you show up to Pan Am's. And so we start to convert that winning goal to, well, what would make you the practitioner that's most likely to win? And so one of the items in that is going to be starting your weight cut early so that you aren't crashing out. You aren't sitting there Thursday night in the sauna just killing yourself to make weight for weigh-ins Friday morning or Saturday morning. Instead, you're actually planning that out. So there's one place where you get better, where you're who you are at that performance is going to be a little bit better. Then it's, what is your strategy? Are you going to be on the attack, or are you going to be trying to be more of a counter player? Are you going to be a guard puller, or are you going to take people down? How are we going to build that into practice? How are we going to make sure that your sparring starts to be more about you establishing your ki, your offense, your plan, as opposed to walking in there and you start wrist fighting and then you're not really in any sort of intention. You're just kind of wrist fighting and thinking about, oh, is this person going to go, or should I pull guard here? Should I grab their leg? Whatever it is, but then your thoughts aren't as ideal. So let's make practice fit, or let's make items in practice actually force you into doing the behaviors that you want to have show up at that tournament. So spar more standing up. Stay after practice a little bit and work on some of your takedowns. Little things like that. how are you going to be talking to yourself when you're in the pen? Are you going to be sitting there looking at other people, going through your head about, oh, this guy did this guy did that. Oh, I remember this person was so good at that. Or are you going to be going through your strategy? Are you going to be thinking, man, I'm going to take down this person. I can't wait to get my hands on my opponent and just start moving them around. And so it's real. And then we take that, and that has to be how you spar, right? You have to rehearse it for your sparring. So it's really what's everything that you're going to be to get that win. And then how do we actually make sure you become that through all the practice that leads up to that tournament? And then because you've done it so much in practice, that becomes what you fall back to when the stress is on. Because
So
trying to come up with something new when there's high stress, good luck with that.
yeah, right. That's what I kind of leads into my next question. As dads, husbands, practitioners, a lot of the times we already come into practice stressed from our day-to-day lives, and being a husband is a very stressful thing, being a dad is a very stressful thing. How can we, as I don't ever plan on winning a world championship, but I feel like that doesn't mean that I can't take away from some of the things that you're talking about. You know what I mean? How can I implement this as just, a hobbyist practitioner the second I walk through that door and practice to where I can separate the two?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you bow to come into the mat, be grateful that it's your time to be on the mat. Realize that when you step over that threshold, when you step onto the mat, you're stepping in to that world of jiu-jitsu. You're stepping out of the other world. The reason only people in the class can be on that mat is because that mat, that time, it's like a wall keeping everything else out. And and yeah, you can't do that instantly, but if you tell yourself every single day when you make that bow to get on the mat, you make that intentional and you remind yourself, hey, as I'm bowing, I'm letting everything else fall away. I'm moving into jujitsu practitioner mode. And I don't care if it's your first week as a white belt. If it's your first week as a white belt, it should actually be easier because this is something brand new. So be excited about it.
Yeah.
Um, the brown belts generally are the ones who have kind of more trouble with that, I found. Purple belts, brown belts, because jiu-jitsu is super familiar for them. They know what they're doing. So now their minds are finally at that place where the outside thoughts can come in because the complexity of the sport isn't so great that their minds are already just taxed out from being anywhere. And that's for them, that's where it really becomes important that they really start to tune back into the ritual of that bow and what that bow should mean to them and how they as advanced practitioners should make that part of their overall practice. For the kid, for MMA fighters, it was always telling them, hey, that cage, when they shut that door, it keeps everybody else out. It's not to keep you in. You get to do whatever you want when that cage door is shut. Like that's a privilege. No, very few people get to do that. Jiu-jitsu is the same way. That once you step on that mat, like you really get to be in this isolated world that it's just doing jiu-jitsu right now. And it's really then going back and kind of, for some people it's good to just journal about it. Hey, today, like for 5 minutes or even 5 seconds after practice, just talk about how it felt good. Talk about the move that you really enjoyed doing. Talk about what felt good in sparring or something like that. But something really focused on the positive of it, because what that's going to do is that's going to build stronger links into your memory towards those feelings that you want to have every time you go out there. And so it's really being deliberate and habitual to train the mind to think the new way you want. And that's how you reprogram the subconscious, is just repeated actions. Everything's learned.
Yeah, I think reflection is one thing that not enough people appreciate when it comes to practice or when it comes to jujitsu. when I was in college, one of the things that they talk about, I got a business degree in college, and one thing they talk about is, you have to look at what you did in the past in order to understand what worked and what didn't work, right? If you never reflect on the mistakes that you made or the victories that you have, then you're less likely to learn from them. When you implement reflection for people, how does that look besides like journaling? Do you have them like, hey, when you get home, I want you to visualize what happened in practice, how you can get out of it, or like what are some techniques that you can use?
Yeah, so usually when I start a reflective practice with somebody, sometimes they just don't have it. And so if you don't even have one, I think the best start is really social media is a great tool for that, because you can do a quick Instagram or TikTok video just talking about, hey, today's practice was good because of this, because of that.
Mm,
I use the social media because it's got its own built-in motivation to keep that person wanting to do that after practice. So it gives them a little bit of reward. So it kind of encourages the behavior. And then usually what I'll also do is I'll give them a handout with just, based upon our conversation, I'll give them a list of prompts to have for their journaling. So it could be, hey, of these five, pick one each day. Today I came in here with this happened. I felt this way. I got on the mats. I started rolling. I started feeling this way. Next time I want to feel this way, right? That type of thing where you go through and you just become aware. For me, it's really developing awareness. That's the reason I want people to reflect and journal, is because I want them to actually take the time to realize how they were in that moment. It's otherwise, if you don't journal, you're just kind of hoping that you remember those things,
mm.
but because you're never actually putting real attention to them, it's random if you're going to remember them or not. And so that's really, for me, it's like capture the stuff that's important. And so depending on your level, what's important, and depending on what your obstacles are, what's important could change. If your obstacles are just not being in your head about what's going on at work or at home, then it's building awareness about when your focus is on your grips or your focus is on the move, how that works better for you, and just getting some awareness around that. If you're a more advanced practitioner, maybe it's more realizing in your reflections, realizing that there's certain things that you're doing, certain habits that you have, and maybe it's being, a little bit lazy with your lapel grip or something like that. And you start reflecting on when you were actually intentional in that and how that worked and how you were able to get intentional. You start learning yourself better. And now you start learning your own strategies to get there. Because I can help you tell you where you want your thoughts to go, and I can help you figure out how to guide where to put your attention. But that fine tuning, that's individual. That, like, I can get you in the room, but I can't tell you which chair necessarily to sit on. We have to work together to figure out which part of that room you should be in. If that
How does
makes
how does
sense as
that
an
work with
analogy.
how does that work for like accountability with some of your like how does that work? I feel like if me and you were in business, right? I feel like, man, he's going to hold me accountable. Like, how are you tracking that, and what happens if they're kind of like not doing the things that they agreed upon?
Yeah, so for me, motivation's a huge thing that we actually study in kinesiology, and that was really the best part about getting a master's in kinesiology versus psychology, was that deep, deep study into motivation, especially motivation in athletic environments. Um, Accountability, the way I give accountability is I remind people of their goals. I
Mm.
remind people of what steps they said would get them there. So I'll explain to them how journaling will help them. I'll give them another couple options that we can focus on, but we're only going to do one thing instead of five things at once.
Mm.
And if they choose the journaling, then I'm texting them, hey, how is the journaling going? Have you had struggles with it? Not, did you do it?
Oh, got you.
That way I get them to realize, oh, I'm just asking you if you're staying committed to yourself. and I'm just holding the mirror in front of you. That's way more effective for motivation, for long-term motivation, than me creating rewards if they do it for a certain number of days, or than me kind of being, an enforcer on them, telling them, creating ultimatums of like, you need to do this or else, I'm going to do this, or here's going to be the consequences. Instead, it's okay, like you said you wanted to do this, but you're not doing it. So should we find something else? What's going on? Why are you not holding yourself accountable to it?
Yeah,
I'm
I'm just
just
thinking about like
reminding you.
that for like the hobbyist, trying to stay
Yeah.
motivated long term and going, and I guess when I'm not feeling motivated, my wife's probably the one that's like, "You're paying for this, are you not going?" And then it's like, "Oh, you're right, I am paying for it." Like, that's part of it, right? But,
Monetary value is a big motivation.
yeah,
It's
but
like,
it'd be
I'm losing
nice to
money.
try to figure some other ways other than, for positive motivation, other than, you're paying for it and the money's just kicking it. And,
Yeah, well,
always,
if you're
always
paying,
looking for those tools.
right, and if you're paying for it, it means that at one point you decided this is valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the question is less, hey, why aren't you showing up if you're paying for this? It's, does this not feel valuable to you anymore? Did you lose touch with that? What were the things that made you want to pay for this in the first place? And then it'll probably come out, well, actually, I've been too busy, and now I kind of have built this story in my head that it's hard to get back. And you're like, no, 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 just come in.
Right, absolutely.
Support for Elbows Tight is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Men's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code ETP20 at manscaped.com. If my math is correct, that's about 8 million balls.
That's a lot of balls, Johnny. When Manscaped reached out to work with us, I instantly thought, yes, what a deal. I've been using Manscaped products for a while now, and when they mentioned helping out with the podcast, I thought it was a no-brainer. I have the Lawnmower 4.0 now, but I had the Lawnmower 3.0 and absolutely loved it. Also, most people think about Manscaped as just trimmers, but really they have ball deodorant, ball toner, the weed whacker, which is your favorite thing, right, John?
Yeah, I love the weed whacker. Look, I'm about to hit like 45 years old, so I got hair growing out of everywhere now. So it's coming out my ears. I'm like, man, where is that weed whacker? It's definitely my favorite.
Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ETP20 at Manscaped. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code ETP20. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools to get the job done with Manscaped. Yeah, why in the jiu-jitsu community we often joke about blue belt blues, right? Because I think jiu-jitsu practitioners, especially when they're white belts, you see that blue belt as the first major goal. I saw a thing on Instagram the other day. There's only two major belts in jiu-jitsu. It's blue belt and black belt. All the other belts people aren't as excited about them as your blue belt. And, we often hear the joke about, blue belt blues, you get your blue belt and you quit. Why do you think that there are people that they achieve this goal and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, that's it. Like, what do you think that's from?
Yeah, I could think of a few different scenarios where somebody gets a blue belt and then kind of just fade off. One could be that they've been at it and they've been pushing through it and they thought at the next level their enjoyment of it would change. Jiu-jitsu, I love jiu-jitsu. I love grappling. I love getting on the mats. I'm also an extreme skier and I also do long endurance mountain bike races. I do like 12-hour mountain bike races. They're all on trail. So for me, I don't really do jiu-jitsu when I'm leading up to my mountain bike races because, you get the hyper blue belt and boom, now your elbow's out for a little bit because they just got a little excited on a move or whatever it is. So it could be just that they realize this isn't sport for them. That's one scenario, probably pretty rare. I think more common is that they felt their ability to get better would somehow speed up at each belt level. that that belt would change who they are, as opposed to realizing, no, you changed, and so now you have this belt. And so I think sometimes people think the belt means something versus no, the belt shows that you became something. The belt's a reflection of how you've been over a period of time. It's not, I think people just somehow think it's like a magic wand somehow at times. Or I think there's a handful of people that think that all of a sudden is going to change things. They're going to win more on the mat. That could be the other thing, is that they think the belt means, that they got to win, or the belt means they need to somehow hold themselves to a new higher standard, as opposed to thinking, okay, I got to this, now what's the next target, versus I got to this, and this means I have to be something right now, versus this represents, okay, now my growth needs to start being more on offense versus just survival.
Yeah, that's a good point, because they get that. A lot of people probably are like, man, I got this blue belt. Now these white belts ain't gonna smash me no more. Nope, you can still get smashed.
Yeah.
And I think if they just stay in it longer, they'll come to the realization that belts are important. But I mean, if your technique's good, I mean, it doesn't really matter what belt you're wearing. Anyone can get caught.
Exactly. I mean, imagine Aaron Pico shows up or Ed Ruth shows up to jiu-jitsu practice, right? I mean, I remember seeing Ed Ruth as a white belt at AKA, and I'll tell you, man, that was not a white belt level skill.
Yeah, we had a high level black belt in the gym for a seminar once, and watching like high level competing black belt versus your hobbyists that are in the class 2-3 times a week, we're like, whoo, totally different level.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, is we see people with the same belt color as us, right? We'll see someone that wins like Pan Am's as a blue belt, and I'm like, Jesus, man, that guy is same age, same size as me, and he would just absolutely destroy me. And then it kind of, that imposter syndrome kicks in, right? It's like, well, do I actually deserve this blue belt? Can you go into how to overcome imposter syndrome and like what's the core cause of it?
Yeah, and you kind of outlined it right there. Imposter syndrome, especially in a jiu-jitsu situation, is largely going to be based upon making a lot of external comparisons. So, am I as good as this guy? These blue belts are beating me. That's the wrong place to be looking at as a blue belt. Are there people in your class that you want to tap more that have been tapping you a bunch? So that's one thing. But does that mean that you deserve your belt? Now you're starting to overgeneralize, and you're not getting self-reference. So I think for that, one of the first things for imposter syndrome starts to be, what are goals for your own style, for your own jiu-jitsu that you want to start working on? Is it improving your guard? And then if it's improving your guard, it's what specifically about your guard do we want to improve? Is it in certain situations you need to learn how to slow down? Is it that you're always going too fast, so you're always trying to move too quick? And so that question has nothing to do with anybody else. And so it's starting to, really what you want to do is you want to have more questions about, what am I doing? What are ways that I'm going to improve? So that the number of questions that you have in terms of how good am I compared to these people starts to be a smaller number and a quieter voice than the what are you doing for yourself. So that's one of the first places I start. The other is to really recognize where you've had success. If you're feeling imposter syndrome at a higher belt level, realize you got to a higher belt level. And then go back and think about all the struggles that you've had in the past. And be honest about yourself, because there probably were. I know as a perpetual white belt, it's figuring out how to be confident when somebody's just like, I feel like smashing today, and I got a black belt, so you got nothing you can do about it. And it's realizing to stay calm in those moments, and to realize, and to be like, to understand two things. One is, yeah, I'm safe. I can always tap. So if I'm feeling physically in fear like that, I would say go talk to your professor, and your professor is going to explain to you how you're okay there. Um, because that needs to be a conversation with your professor. That's not go see somebody outside your gym to figure out. Really work that out. Have the courage to talk to your professor about that. Because I bet your professor is actually going to like that conversation with you. Like that's going to be one of the fun ones for him or her. So that's, it's starting to think what are some of the other um, not true or irrational things you're thinking about yourself. Am I not good enough as a blue belt? Is that a valid question? Is that a valid question? Once again, go up and ask your professor. He might say, "You're fine as a blue belt. Your consistency, that's something that you might need to work on." And so it's changing it from the focus being on I'm not enough or I'm not as much as these people to being what am I trying to work on today? What am I trying to become? How far can I get this week? What are the steps I need to do to get to that place at the end of the week? And it'll take time. It'll feel, if you got full blown imposter syndrome and you're just, every time you step on the mat, your inner voice is just in this constant chatter of you not being enough, of you not being good enough, of your skills being inadequate, of other people being better. It's going to take a few weeks to turn the volume down on that. And it's going to take you being intentional. So then maybe you need to have some self-talk of saying, hey, I'm focused on having stronger grips this week. I'm focused on getting that lapel a little bit higher. I'm focused on being willing to open my guard more. Or I'm going to focus on establishing a dominant position and then pausing, taking a breath, and it's really learning how to establish a dominant position. One of the fighters I worked with, he told me, he said, "Hey, if you're in a good position, you don't need to do anything. Your opponent needs to do something,
Yep.
and you should wait for your opponent to do something so you can get an even better position."
Yeah, it's
And I
nice
used
when
to
that light
think,
goes
oh, if
off.
I got a good position, I gotta go, right?
Yeah. I got to look for the submission now. Now there's something else that I need to do.
Yeah, I'm not doing enough right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus like, hey, no, if that arm's hard to reach, wait for him to bring it over.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's where like, that is the point of where you're at right now. Where you're at right now is to get your opponent to now do the wrong thing. Like, I, so that, it's starting to turn off that focus on, am I better than this person, to what am I improving on?
When it,
And, oh, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, when it comes to goals, though, do you ever feel like people get so wrapped up into their goal setting and not achieving them that it actually becomes detrimental?
Yeah, if there's the people that can kind of come up with their spreadsheets of goals and have, I'm sure you've seen them where they have either various web apps and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
it's like it's crazy, or it's intense. It's a lot. And for me, when I see that, I start to try to help them uh, decide, is that the volume that they want to have in their life, even though they may have put all that stuff on there, because it's become this huge list of tasks. Now they're controlled. They're controlled by themselves, but it's like they're being controlled by somebody else, even though it's themselves. And so then we try to make the goals more about achieving a future vision of who they are, as opposed to checking off boxes. So looking for growth versus looking for accomplishment. I think that's where, if the goals are just so hyper accomplishment and there's not much in there in terms of growth, and so accomplishment really is everything you're doing ultimately is to get more wins or to get more taps or to place higher in tournaments versus being more relaxed on the mat, whether it's somebody good or somebody who's brand new. Be more relaxed, um, be more intentional, as opposed to on the defense, right? However you guys talk about it in your gym, it's really getting into that. What's more uh, style, so it's more personal growth versus accomplishment. It's, oh, now I can tap out, um, I'm tapping out 10 people this way. There's times where that works, but there's other times where it's got to be less accomplishment based.
Hearing him say all these things, I'm like, man, we've done this, right? Like, over 4 or 5 years, right? Everything you're saying, I'm thinking, yep, done that. Like, going in, want to be more intentional, right? You're going in, you're like, hey, I'm gonna be relaxed, I'm gonna breathe, all of these things. And I'm like, wow, it took us, 5 years of just trial and error to do all these things. And I'm like, now see, if we'd had a coach, he would have just told us right from the beginning, all of these things. It saved all that heartache.
Right. It's definitely jiu-jitsu has, we mentioned this in one of our previous episodes. It's definitely more mental in our eyes. Like, it's way more mental growth than physical growth. You know what I mean? Like, you definitely become a stronger person mentally, probably before physically in jiu-jitsu. Why do you think that is?
The when you're starting out, it's brutal. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big places is, I've heard it said from multiple different gyms, multiple different programs. Your white belt is learning how to survive, and for sure, that's a big chunk of it. Is just that stepping into the idea that you're going to be in more of a physical environment. I think that's something that modern life, that's good, and something that modern life doesn't allow much of. And so that's probably, for me, that's probably one of the biggest places as people come in. Uh, Especially, it's people come to jujitsu kind of after they've been out of athletics for a little bit. You do have your practitioners that are kind of lifetime, high school all the way through, and they're incredible. And then you have more hobbyists who are, yeah, I need to actually have something physical in my life again, and they pick jujitsu as that sport. And then all of a sudden it's that just onslaught of, whoa, I'm getting tapped a lot and I'm getting smashed and I'm feeling beat up. And oh man, I got all these mat burns and I got bruising, and I got black eyes, whatever it is. And it's just kind of realizing like, hey, it's more physical, and that's you just being a more rounded human.
Yeah, I agree. I think too. I think you get mentally tough quick too, because like you said, if you're coming into it in your later years, you're physically declining, but you're still mentally sharp, right? So now you're like, man, how can I work this way smarter than being as physical as I want to be but can't be?
I think also when you're older too, you're more patient when it comes to these things too, right? Like when we're younger, I was a welder when I was 16 years old, and after I got out of the Navy, I had stopped welding for a couple years, and then I went to go get my weld certifications, and it was like this moment where I struck my arc for the first time in not welding for a while, and I was like, dude, I am crushing it right now. Like, I'm so much more calm, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like 10 years older than I was when I first started, and it was just like a completely different, like, whole idea of what I needed to do. I was just like, I'm just having fun, man. I was like, I'm not worried about nearly as much of the things as I used to be. I'm just way more relaxed.
Yeah, and I felt the same way coming back to jiu-jitsu after shoulder surgery. It wasn't hard mentally. If anything, it's been easier mentally. But it was just harder physically because I had been out for a while. But it was like having that time off. I don't know if everything just marinated in my brain and it went where it needed to go. But it was much easier coming back, and just mentally, it was just easier. I don't know if that separation helped sometime.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really, I think the ultimate goal in life is to be as I guess holistically rounded as possible. So that means you're not just mental, you're not just physical, you're all, right? And you're bold and you're brave, so you're willing to be, you're willing to be vulnerable in places, and you're willing to feel, as opposed to trying to make everything about feeling a certain way. And that's way easier as we get older, because we realize, yeah, it's not all unicorns and ice cream, right?
I wish. So
But
if people can't find a coach, or they can't afford a coach, or um, but they still want to improve, this whole mental shift in their lives, what are some resources that people can use to do that?
absolutely. So a few that I have personally, I'm putting up quite a bit of content. I'm going to start putting up a lot for BJJ. I did a visualization series on my TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. So you can go to Fit Mind Training on Instagram, or at Dr. Mojo back on TikTok. Everybody's like, oh, you got to have just one for all of them. It's just not my style.
Right.
and I'm starting out TikTok late, so that name was already taken anyway. The other places you can go, there's actually quite a bit of online resources. I'm actually building out coursework on that, fitmindtraining.com. There's a book called Pure Sport. It was probably the best sports psych book I ever read, that was really written to be kind of in that pop science type of, more accessible, easier to read type of book, not made for academics.
Oh man, those are hard to read. Holy crap. Like reading white
Yeah.
papers, I'm like,
Yeah, it's you get a doctorate, and you kind of, you learn language for that environment, and then you realize, wait, other people don't speak that way, so you gotta tone it down. So I'm putting up courses and stuff too, but really, I'd say, there's my resources, the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. They have some good, just general guide and resources there. And then, there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. I always, I always say, watch 5 different experts and then figure out which way you think fits best for you. And each of those 5 ways probably work, but you are going to actually do the work with one of those 5. And to make you get better, it's actually on you doing the work. So you got to, it's like picking jujitsu gyms. Pick the one that you're going to keep showing up to. If you like it, but it's 2 hours away, that's probably the wrong gym for you,
yeah.
right? Or if it's like between two and you're like, this one's cooler, but I like the people here better. Well, why are you picking the cooler one?
No kidding.
Because jiu-jitsu, they're both cool.
Yeah, right. John, you just had an app open. What was that?
Well, he said FitMind, and I was like, hold on, I got the FitMind app. I wanted to make sure.
Oh,
What we're talking about.
fitmindtraining.com
Yeah.
is my website.
I was like, hold on, do I already have this? I was like, no.
So, what do you think what is the probably the number one reason why people fail at their goals, and or get in their own way of improving their mindset when they get into something difficult like a jujitsu or MMA or something like that?
It really, for me, ultimately, it stems down to not being present in the current moment. And what I mean by that is, when you're showing up on the mats, are you there to be on the mats, or is your attention or your thoughts kind of half divided towards other parts of your life? And so that'll cause a lot of problems, because then you're operating at a lower percent of who you are. So that's one of the big ones. The other thing is, if you aren't present in the current moment, then that means you're either, it could mean that you're trying too hard to get that accomplishment, and you're too focused on that win. So if we're meeting in the center of the mat during a tournament, and I'm shaking your hand, and I'm trying to fast forward in my mind to me beating you, then that's a percentage of my thoughts that aren't looking at, where are your hands, where are your feet, where are your hips, where's your head? Why are you pulling me this way? Why am I reacting to you? all those thoughts you should have, if you aren't fully present, all that ability to perform in the moment goes away. And then you start feeling frustration. And then frustration comes in, and then you start creating judgment on top of that frustration. And then that's where everything starts to blow up and go really south. So that's where people really start stepping on themselves, is not being able to be present. And so a lot of people, what I really encourage is to develop a mindful meditation practice, because that really is the best practice ground for being present. The Wim Hof breathing is fantastic for lowering stress, for putting yourself in the zone. Meditation on a long run is better at learning how to be present in the moment. So you should do both, not just
What
one or the other.
what's that breathing technique you just, the Wim Hof? What is that?
Wim Hof, that's where, so Wim Hof is one where it's a lot of heavy breathing in and short breaths out. And so it's really an intense inhale type of breathing method. Um, I, I mean, he teaches it. I think there's a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu community that do that. And it's a great breathing method, and it really brings you up and activates you and gets your brain really firing. And so people do that as a regular practice in lieu of meditation. And so the breathing, it helps basically get the brain to be more active or to get it to be less active. It's all sympathetic, parasympathetic type of things. Whereas meditation is more about not being too attached to the future, and not being too attached to the past. So you step on the mat for today with the skills that you have, not as opposed to stepping on the mat today with these problems in your life, with these other things, with all this other stuff going on, or with these, it has to be a certain way. I have to get 10 taps today, or else I've got another thing that's wrong with me. Instead, it's, hey, like, you bowed, you step on the mat, be on the mat. You're doing positional sparring. Be in that position and go to the position you want. That's all that matters right now. And when you start bringing other stuff in, oh, you miss their lapel. Oh, I always miss their lapel. Oh, now I'm going to tell myself a story. Well, now you're not in the present anymore.
Right?
Yeah, and I think we've all been guilty of that, right? Especially in class, they're like, all right,
start
let's
focusing on
practice.
everything.
You're like, shit, I totally missed the entire last 5 minutes, or whatever they were showing.
It's like autopilot when you drive to work. You're so used to the same routine
Yeah,
every day.
you're like,
All of a
"Ah,
sudden,
how
you're
did
in
I
the
get
parking
here?"
lot, and you're like, "Did I hit anything?"
Or you're trying to go somewhere else and you inadvertently find yourself halfway to work and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. That's so funny. Being present in the moment is a big thing, especially in jiu-jitsu. We talked to Jason Khalipa, CrossFit Games athlete, champion, and he talks about like AMREP mindset, right? Being present in the moment is what he kind of in his book, and he says jiu-jitsu is the ultimate, AMREP workout, because if you're not present in the moment, like you're gonna get choked, and then you're gonna be present when you're like, oh crap, where did I mess up at?
Absolutely. And I think jujitsu is like if you want to get mind body connection, jujitsu is a great sport to develop that. You can do it through yoga, but if yoga is not your thing, go do jujitsu.
Right? It's forceful yoga.
Right.
So, hey John, well, you got anything else, man?
I guess, man, just one question we always ask is, what's one piece of advice you would give to a practitioner? Normally, we'll say white, blue belt level, just to keep them motivated and to have that right mindset approaching jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. What I want you to do is I want you to start writing down one goal each day for practice. And I want that goal to be about a specific improvement that you are going to make in your technique. If you do that for 4 weeks, you're going to learn a lot about how to set goals for yourself, how to deal with when you miss them and when you achieve them, and how to make the goals progressively more difficult so that you actually feel growth in your skill. Try that for 4 weeks. I think that's going to fundamentally change how you make an approach towards jiu-jitsu, and then maybe you don't need anything else until your next belt level. It's kind of be willing to go deep so that you master, as opposed to wanting to just have everything but very shallow. You know, as white belt, should I be great at spider guard, rubber guard, every type of guard, right? De La Riva, right? Yeah. Versus, hey, we're working on De La Riva today. I'm a white belt. What's my goal though? Breathing, not holding my breath. So today I'm gonna. So a good goal, if you're a white belt, might be, I'm gonna notice when I'm not breathing. I'm gonna start breathing. That would be the type of goal I'd want you to set. That would be making your skill better. I notice that my entire body is tense. If I'm not using my legs, I need to relax my legs.
Right.
If I don't currently have a grip that I'm struggling to hold on to, maybe I don't need to be pumping out my forearm. And so I need to learn how to relax. And so I'm going to make goals that are going to help me build that ability.
I think that's great. I think small goals like that every class is. That's the first time we've heard that one. That's a good one though.
But I remember going through it.
Yep.
Like, gotcha, why am I burning? I have nothing left in these forearms.
Yeah, all that work for nothing. Like,
Yeah, why did they hold that? It was stupid.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to the breathing one because it's definitely there's times when I'll roll one time and I'm like, did I breathe? Like I am exhausted from that one. Like I'm lightheaded. You know what I mean? Like did I just roll that whole time, that whole 5 minutes, like with minimal breathing? That's not very smart. That's something that I definitely need to be more present in the moment with is my breathing and understanding, why I'm doing certain things. So, but hey, Dr. Toby, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. This was a great conversation. I think people are going to find a ton of value in what you said. And I think it's people, even if they don't compete and they don't want to be a world champion or perform at the highest level, I still think there's just so much that they can gain from this conversation. So thank you so much for coming on today. If people want to follow you or check out your stuff, where can they find you at?
Yeah, Instagram, I'm at FitMind Training. On TikTok, I'm at Dr. Mojo Back. On YouTube, I'm at Dr. Toby. And then I'm Toby Larson, MSEDD on LinkedIn. My website is fitmindtraining.com.
Perfect, man. Thank you so much for coming on today. John, you got anything else?
Nope, thank you.
All right, guys. Remember, follow, like, follow us, elbows tight everywhere. And remember, no oil checks here.
Bruce.
All right, guys. Thanks. Peace.